Good morning, Viraji. Sorry, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. We can hear
Good
you.
afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm online now, right? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Right.
It's very clear.
That volume is okay, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Right. Do you want me to share the presentation, the first slide?
Yes, sir. Sir, is it to check? We will have an introduction in 5 minutes, sir.
Right. I mean, during the introduction, do you want the first slide on?
No, sir. We have
No.
separate slides.
Sorry, could you repeat what you said, please?
So we have made some slides for the introduction. After the introduction, we'll your shareable.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Kavindi Sabaratna and I'll be moderating the webinar today. Before we start, I would like to give a brief introduction about the Road to Rights G17 University Ambassadors Consortium and about this project. The Road to Rights is an award-winning youth-led voluntary organization established in 2009 in Sri Lanka by the evolution of a childhood dream to serve the humanity from the age of 8, aimed at supporting and empowering young people in creating opportunities, skills development, creativity, and innovation by taking a human rights-based approach towards peace and sustainable development. The organization was recognized and awarded in various international and local platforms, including the United Nations SDG Action Award out of 125 countries in 2018 in Germany, an International Human Rights Hero Award in 2012 in Belgium. The organization initiated Action to Impact, which is a 9-year-long international campaign to accelerate the progress of localizing sustainable development goals in Sri Lanka, in supporting the United Nations Decade of Action. G17 University Ambassadors Consortium is a global undergraduate platform initiated by the Road to Rights organization with its ultimate vision to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development within the university community. G17 is dedicated towards empowering university students on sustainable development goals to become the next generation of young professionals and make SDGs a reality through its 4 pillars: capacity building, leadership, policy advocacy, and action. As we all know, the Sustainable Development Goals are a collection of 17 interlinked global goals designed to create a sustainable future for all, and it was initiated under the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development by the UN in 2015. It recognizes that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. Sustainable Development Goal number 7 is Partnerships for Goals, and it aims to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnerships for sustainable development. The SDGs can only be realized with strong global partnerships and cooperation. A successful development agenda requires inclusive partnerships at the global, regional, national, and local levels. Many countries require official development assistance to encourage growth and trade. Strong international cooperation is needed now more than ever to ensure that countries have the means to achieve the SDGs. Under goal number 17, the UN has defined 19 targets, and the webinar today is based on 2 such targets. Target 17.7, promote development, transfer, dissemination, and diffusion of environmentally sound technologies and into developing countries. Target 17.8, strengthen the science, technology, and innovation capacity, building mechanisms for the least developed countries. Moving on, G17 University Ambassadors Consortium has given the opportunity for ambassadors where they could initiate a project in order to overcome a prevailing issue in their university, Sri Lanka, or globally. The way forward is a project led by the G17 ambassadors for SDG goal number 17, Ms. Viraji Aryatilaka from University of Peradeniya and Ms. Navoda Jayasinghe from University of Kelaniya. We also have partnered with the Department of Environmental and Industrial Sciences, Faculty of Science, University of Peradeniya as the knowledge partner to bring you this outstanding project. Now we have come to the most important moment of today's webinar. The guest lecture, Solar Villages for Sustainable Development, Reduction of Poverty, and Mitigation of Climate Change Effects will be done by Professor I.M. Dharmadasa. Let me take a moment to introduce our distinguished speaker. Professor I.M. Dharmadasa, a proud product of the Faculty of Science, University of Peradeniya, and later University of Durham, UK, now leads the Solar Energy Research Group within the Materials and Engineering Research Institute, Sheffield Hallam University, United Kingdom. He has 4 decades of research experience in both industry and academia, and his work has secured 6 GB patents, over 200 journal papers, 4 book chapters, and 2 books. Professor Dharmadasa is a fellow of the World Innovation Foundation and the UK Institute of Physics. He referees for over 14 international journals. He holds dual citizenship and is currently advising several government ministries for using renewable energy as a tool for sustainable development and the empowerment of rural communities. Professor Dharmadasa is actively involved in the promotion of clean energy technologies for social development and reduction of poverty. He helped establish and now leads the South Asia Renewable Energy Promotional Program, which aims to accelerate the adoption of renewable energy technologies through the Solar Village program. He also currently serves as a panel member for the European Commission. In the past, he has served as an assessor and panel member for the UK Funding Council, Department of Trade and Industry, the British Council, and as an academic advisor for the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission. Professor Dharmadasa is one of the founding members of the APSL UK Charity Association of Professional Sri Lankans in UK, and has served as the Vice President for 5 years and the President for 2 years. Without further ado, I would like to warmly welcome Professor I.M. Dharmadasa to conduct the guest lecture. So we are truly honored to have you here, and the stage is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. Is it possible for me to share the presentation, please?
So now we can share the screen.
Cannot see how. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir. We can see the screen.
Okay. Also, can you see the cursor?
Yes, sir.
You can see the cursor as well. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, thank you for the organizers for inviting me to deliver this lecture. You can see the title here, Solar Energy for Sustainable Development, Reduce Poverty, and Mitigate Climate Change Effects. During this presentation, I would like to talk about current energy production, their harmful nature, and the way forward. I will also talk about science behind solar energy conversion. This is mainly for science and engineering people. Then I will go on to solar energy applications, solar village projects for sustainable development, future energy production, and the outlook. So that is the plan of the presentation. First of all, look at what we have been doing. We means the human kind. About 250 years ago, industrial revolution took place mainly due to finding fossil fuel and establish carbon economy. So what we are using now is solid carbon, coal. This is the most polluting coal, the fossil fuel today, the liquid carbon, oil, petrol, diesel, and gaseous carbon, methane, ethane, propane, butane, and pentane. So when you see that, the energy density is very high on this side, low in this side. Therefore, this is a bit more cleaner because you don't emit a lot of carbon dioxide. So when you burn all these, carbon oxidize and produce carbon dioxide and pump into the atmosphere. So this is what we have been doing for about 250 years now. When we burn fossil fuel, we pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. There are other nasty gases as well, sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide, nitric oxide. And what we have been doing is continuously pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and also destroying forests. The forests are very important for our survival. These are carbon dioxide absorbers via photosynthesis. Not only that, they keep our soil together. They fertile our soil. When it is raining, the forest absorb water and release slowly so that it protects flooding. The most important one they do is sitting out there, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, combined with water and light. Through photosynthesis, it gives out oxygen into the atmosphere. It purifies the atmosphere. So this process is called photosynthesis. This is very similar to the function of our lungs. Our lungs absorb carbon dioxide from the bloodstream and gives out oxygen into the bloodstream. Because of that reason, we say that trees are the lungs of our planet. We know that if we damage our lungs, we die. In the same way, if we damage our trees, our planet dies. That means we cannot live on the Earth planet. That is the message. So what is the, if you look at, because of these reasons, at the same time, fossil fuel developed only 2/3 of the world population. 1/3 is not connected to the national grid and has polluted the atmosphere. Hence, we talk about global warming and climate change. This is nothing to argue. Now we can see the effects of these. On the planet, in some areas, have too little water. Therefore, we have droughts and desertification. We can see sandstorms, especially in countries with large deserts. Tornadoes, you heard the very recent tornado in the United States. They are very destructive, and forest fires. They all pollute the atmosphere. So this is what happens when we have too little water. In some other part of the world, we have too much water. We have severe floods, disappearing islands. In Maldives Islands, there are 1,200 atolls, and they are disappearing now. Landslides and storms and hurricanes. These are the damaging effects of climate change. So this is what happened because of severe use of fossil fuel. So what is the solution? What is the way forward? We need a new revolution. This is called sustainable revolution. In this sustainable revolution, we need to do two things. Rapidly introduce clean energy technologies to reduce greenhouse gases. These are 6 renewable energy sources. I will focus on solar, PV solar only, but everything I say is applicable to all other renewables here. So what we need to do is produce our energy without emitting greenhouse gases. That is number 1. Number 2, to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we have to grow more trees around the globe. They will naturally absorb carbon dioxide and purify the atmosphere. That is number one. That is the easy one, natural and easiest method. The second method is absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and deposit in the earth crust. This is an artificial and very expensive method. In fact, there is one experiment I will mention what people do. They are trying to use a huge machine, suck air into the machine, separate carbon dioxide from the air, and pass that carbon dioxide gas into a chamber with high temperature and pressure. And in the chamber, they keep a single crystal of diamond. Diamond is crystallized carbon, and those carbon from carbon dioxide hopefully break the bonds and carbon will deposit. So what they are trying to do, absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and deposit as crystalline diamond. Diamond is a very valuable gem, if you like. So it is a very expensive one, still in research stage. I hope it will be successful, but that is not easy either, because our atmosphere is all around the globe, but you can have these machines in one place. Yes, it is useful if we can make diamond, but I don't know how we can reduce carbon dioxide. I think it is wise to go for natural and easiest way of growing trees around the globe. And also one other thing I want to mention here, renewable energy means energy for all. I mentioned that fossil fuel developed only 2/3 of the world. 1/3 is very poor. They are not connected to the national grid. But if you go for renewable energy, PV for all, PV for all, that is energy for all, and also PV for peace. PV is everywhere. Nobody can damage it through any attacks, terrorist attacks. So when we use PV, we can create a peaceful world. So these two are very important, energy for all and PV for peace. When everybody has energy, then there is no difference between the rich and poor. So everybody can develop, and that will reduce a lot of problems. We have social problems in the world. So let me talk about the solar energy conversion. This is mainly for science and technology people, science, technology, and engineering people. But at the same time, I will explain it in simple way. The light is photons. We consider light can be considered as a wave or a particle. In PV, we consider it as a photon because light has duality. We call it duality of light. Both properties are there. What we need to do is we need to convert all the photons into DC electricity. To do this, we need an electronic device. This device is called the solar cell. To make a solar cell, we have to grow solar cell materials. We have to study them first and optimize their properties. Once we are happy with it, we design an electronic device, fabricate and assess them, and develop them to produce the highest conversion efficiency. That is what researchers do in this field. So this is what happens in the solar cell. Light comes in, fall on the electronic device. This is the solar cell. We have usually it is a PN junction. We have an electric field. The photon comes in, and that energy creates an electron hole pair by breaking a covalent bond between, say, two silicon atoms. It will create an electron and a hole. Those are the charge carriers. This electric field separates them. One goes to the front contact, the other one goes to the back contact, and you have DC electricity in the outside circuit. So the photon is converted into DC electricity. Let me show it in a more useful way. Shall we use a PN junction as a PV solar cell? We can take a p-type semiconductor. Semiconductors are the solar cell materials, conduction band, valence band, Fermi level. That shows how much electrons you have here. It is like a beaker with little water. And then let us get n-type semiconductor, the same conduction band and valence band. It has a lot of electrons. The Fermi level is there. Fermi level is just like the water level in a beaker. So this one has more water, this one has less water. If I connect these two beakers with a pipe, the water will flow from there to there until the two levels are equalized. The same thing happens if I bring these two semiconductors together to make intimate contact. Now, in this case, electrons flow from higher energy levels to lower energy levels. You can see now when the electrons flow from higher energy to lower level, you get a beautiful band bending. So can you see the in this area, junction area, you have a slope. Now this diagram is energy in the y-axis, distance in the x-axis. So if you take this gradient, that is dV by dx, volts per meter. That is electric field. So what you have created is you have created an electric field in this area. That is the depletion region. Now, if I want to use it as a solar cell, I need an external circuit. Now I have the external circuit with ohmic contact here, metal contact, another contact here, and bulb is the load now. Now, if I need to bring a photon light, it comes with energy. That photon has energy of h nu. That energy will break a bond. It will create electron hole pair. The electron is just like a marble on a slope. It will go to my right. Hole is just like air bubble in water. It will go to my left in slow motion. These charge carriers go through the device and give subtle light. So what we have done is we have converted that photon into DC electricity. Let me show you quickly a p-ion junction again, very similar, p-type semiconductor, I-type semiconductor, n-type semiconductor. Bring them together to make a intimate contact, p-ion diode, and the same thing happens. The electrons will flow from high energy levels to low energy levels. When this happens, the Fermi level equalize, and you can see a beautiful gradient in the middle I layer, so you can control this layer. It is much better than the p-n junction. Now bring an external circuit. Our load is a fan in this case. Let us bring the photon. Photon comes with energy. This energy will be absorbed. It will break a covalent bond between two silicon atoms, creating an electron and a hole. Hole is a electron vacancy. Electron will flow to the right, hole will flow to the left, and in slow motion, you have DC electricity in the circuit. Once you have understand this principle, these two slides, you all are experts in solar energy. In fact, what we need is this thickness should be only about 2 or 3 micron thick. Just imagine our human hair is about 50 nanometers diameter. We need only about 2 nanometers. So we are going into atomic and molecular level. So these are very thin devices. That is what we do in devices. Now, this is my own design. Very recently, we published this. In most of the cases, to promote one electron from valence band to the conduction band, you must have energy greater than the band gap. So in sunlight, we have UV visible infrared. This is the sun spectrum. You have the blue end here, then visible region and infrared. Now, this infrared contribution is about 52%. Ideally, we need to harvest all the photons in the spectrum. So why we designed this? To absorb UV visible infrared all in one device. And also in the same device, we combine impact ionization and impurity PV effect in order to produce high performance. Just look at when the light comes in, this structure is a special one. This is the back contact. This is the front contact. And this one is a P, this is the Fermi level, by the way. This is a P-type semiconductor, wide band gap. And you can see that band gap is shrinking as you go downwards. And also it is somewhere here, Fermi level is right in the middle, it is intrinsic. Now here, Fermi level is close to the conduction band, it is N-type. So it is a very special device. And you will see that when the light comes in, the blue light will absorb here. It will create an electron hole pair. Electron will accelerate that way. It will gain enough energy to break another covalent bond. Let us see what happens when that happens. One photon creates 2 electron hole pairs. That means our current will be very high. Now, the rest of the solar spectrum flows inside, absorbed gradually, and now coming into infrared area because the band gap is smaller. I have drawn only one impurity level here because there are a lot of impurity levels. Just for explanation, there is one impurity level. So one infrared can promote electron from there to there. It is waiting there now. Another infrared can put it into the conduction band. So can you see, we have absorbed UV, visible and infrared, all three. And also we combine with impact ionization and impurity PV effect. All these things are built into one device. In fact, when we did this, it's in the same year I designed this and then went to University of Sheffield, asked them to grow it with a known semiconductor gallium arsenide and aluminum gallium arsenide. I measured these values. VOC was nearly 1.2 volts. That is the maximum you can get. In fact, when I saw it, I was over the moon because this is the highest VOC produced for a single device. And fill factor, if it is greater than 0.8, you don't have to worry about, you have a beautiful device. And these two were the highest. The current was around 11, 12. Now in this situation, we have to measure 3 parameters, VOC, fill factor and JSC for solar cells. I got 2 maximum values. I have to be very careful because all researchers are competitors. So what you need to do when you are in this situation, you have to independently check them in different labs. So I send my devices to Zurich, South Bank University in London, Michael Gratzel's group in Switzerland, and NREL in the United States. What I got was exactly the same results. These tiny changes happens because these are different devices from the same batch. Fill factors are exactly the same. And the current were very similar. Devices were about 12% efficient. And I went to the second, I saw some weaknesses in the structure. We grew it for the second time. The efficiency shot up to 20%. So by testing it, so we designed it by putting all the physics knowledge, device knowledge into the device structure. During the same year, we experimentally tested it. We got the best results. Now we are confident we are working along this device. I will show you this to show another important effect here. You saw that all 3 are absorbed, and you saw that combined band-to-band impact ionization. Let me show you that. The light comes in. You have seen this before. You are seeing it again. So that is impact ionization. There is another impact ionization here in this device. In this case, I have drawn 3 defect levels. Please remember, in addition to this sunlight, we have a lot of infrared around us in the surroundings. So what happens is, from the surroundings, heat energy promote electrons from conduction band to the valence band to the defect levels. They are waiting there now. Now, this one needs a little bit of push to go to the conduction band. So that push can be given by the electrons coming from the top. It is like billiard balls hitting them and pushing them into the conduction band. Can you see? It is another combination of impact ionization and impurity PV effect. So this way, we can create a lot of charge carriers within the device structure. If you look at it, it is an avalanche effect. It is not only sunlight is the input. We have another input here. It's a beautiful input. This is the heat from surroundings. Both are contributing to create a lot of electrons and holes. These are charge carriers. Therefore, you can produce very high performance devices using this structure. Now what we are doing is we have designed the device. We have tested it with known materials, gas-cell gas, and now we are doing it with cheaper materials. That is what we need, because the way we need to produce solar panels is to cut down the cost. So electrodeposition is a low-cost technique. About 31 years ago, I was working for British Petroleum company in London. And this is where I saw electrodeposition of semiconductors. I was shocked. You can grow semiconductor materials in a beaker in an aqueous solution. So what you do is this. This is a very simple electrodeposition system we learn in our GCSE O-level and A-level classes. What you have is a solution with ions, cathode and anode, and apply using a potentiostat, apply a very small voltage, about 2 volts DC. And what you do is, when this is negative, you attract positive ions and then discharge their deposit there. So that is electrodeposition. What are the advantages? These are the controls we need to do. We have to control the concentration, pH value, growth potential, temperature, and stirring. So these are the research we have to do. And then what are the advantages? Low power, we are applying only 2 volts DC. Low equipment cost. When you grow semiconductors, normally MBE and MOCVD cost about 1 million pounds. That is the instrument cost. This instrument cost only about 6,000 pounds. This is the potentiostat connected to a computer. So low power, low equipment cost, high material yield. You deposit only on this area. Otherwise, if you are evaporating, the material goes everywhere. You get only a little bit. So high material yield, it is scalable. And then what are the challenges? We have to control chemistry, contamination issues. Materials need heat treatment. But this heat treatment is about 200-300 degrees, not very high. When you talk about silicon, you have to heat them to 1,500 degrees centigrade. So 400 is nothing. So this is what the electrodeposition is. It is a low-cost technique, and it is scalable. You can have door size, 2-3 meters square panels connected to cathode, and you can have a very large tank. And this is the anode, you can electrodeposit. So it is low cost, it is scalable, and also it is manufacturable. This is what we did as a group of 26 scientists in BP. We scaled it up. What we did was we produced a 1 foot by 1 foot prototype, and it took us about 8 years, 26 people working, unlimited research funds from the company, and full-time working. We created that 1 foot by 1 foot prototype, and then British Petroleum went to California and they established a 1 megawatt power plant and produced these solar panels using electroplating. This was around 2000. They were in the forefront. They were producing nearly 11% efficient 1 meter square solar panels. Unfortunately, after 2 years, as an oil company, they decided to close down PV activities, shocking the PV field. But I will tell you later, one company closes, but another company opens. The first solar company in the United States now doing cadmium sulfide CadTel solar cell using another method, the SCC method. It is a vapor method. You evaporate material and deposit, and they are doing it beautifully these days in everywhere. Malaysia and Germany and United States, they have plants. This is my group. About few years ago, you can see people from Middle East, Nigeria, Malaysia, and they have all finished, and they are back in universities. At the moment, I have one from Nigeria, one from Bangladesh, another one coming from Ghana, and the last one coming from Taiwan. It is a really an international group, because the beauty of this method, electrodeposition, is, this is my lab, by the way, you need a fume cupboard to do it carefully. We have about 3 or 4 fume cupboards here to do the electroplating. This is a beautiful technology for developing countries, because you don't need very expensive instruments like MBE and MOCVD. You can have a research lab, and you can train your people. So these are the future trainers. This is what we do in my lab. We have glass FTO, zinc sulfide, cadmium telluride, thin layers. Band diagram is, you can see wide band gap, smaller band gap, smallest one. There are 3 layers. When you heat treat, these junctions merge together and increase this slope. So this is a graded band gap device. So we have done quite a lot. To date, during these 31 years, I have completed 29 PhDs in this field. Still, I know very little, and we are continuously working. This is what we are doing. These are the IV curves of solar cells. My students have been producing 10.4%, 15.4%, and 18.5%. This is a very high value. This is good enough for scale up and commercialize. So our latest one is graded band gap device. What we have here is, this is the Fermi level, and you have a P-type semiconductor here, large band gap, and an N-type semiconductor here. You fix the Fermi level there. In between these 2 levels, you can have one material like perovskite, or PN junction, or PIN junction, or a graded band gap device. So what we are going is starting with few layers, and we are developing this device. That is what we do. So in fact, can you see what this one is doing is, it is sending all the electrons that way, one way. It stops electron going backwards. What this one is doing is sending all the holes that way, not going that way. So we call this electron back diffusion barrier layer. This is the whole back diffusion barrier layer, and these are the devices we are doing at the moment. So let me come back to application side. Who discovered photovoltaic effect? Edmond Becquerel in 1839. This is a wonderful French family. This is his father. He was working on electrochemistry. He was 19 years old. During that time, they didn't have electricity. He must have brought a candle to help his father when it is dark. So he had cathodes and anodes dipped in a solution connected to ammeters, and he must have seen when he brought the light, the needle is moving. So he took the light away, the needle comes back. So he saw that light is producing electricity. So that is the photovoltaic effect. Photons can be converted into volts, electric current. This is his son, Henry Becquerel. He was Marie Curie's PhD supervisor. Both of them invented radioactivity and won the Nobel Prize for Physics. This is also a great physicist, worked on, this is Henry's son, worked on optical and magnetic properties of crystals. It's a great physics family from France. Now, this is the timeline of solar energy technologies. Discovery came in 1839, but people were very happy during that time. They had enough fossil fuel. In fact, before the car was invented, they were getting petrol, large amount of petrol by distilling the oil. They didn't know what to do with it. What they did was they made a hole on the ground. They put the petrol there and burnt it. So they had enough of fossil fuel. They didn't worry about this. But you must have seen during this time, Millikan's oil drop experiment. Czochralski, 100 years ago, made the first silicon crystal. Albert Einstein came. Until 1954, solar cells didn't come very well. So can you see, more than 100 years. And by 1954, 4.5% efficient, 59, 10% efficient silicon solar cells were made, and they were used in space vehicles. In 1960, 14% came up. They used this in, this is the company who made it. 1970 gave the first kick. Oil crisis taught a lesson. We should not depend only on fossil fuel imported from other countries, and people started to do research. Now people have been working on thin film solar cells, dye-sensitized solar cells, organic solar cells, perovskite. Now they are looking at all kinds of different materials. This is what has happened within the, because of the research. In 1975, the cost of solar was extremely high. It was almost $100 to produce 1 watt of solar power. Please remember, $100 is needed to produce 1 watt of solar power. As a result of research, cost came down and down and down. You can see that now we are around, after 2010, it is almost there. So when the cost came down, the application came up. Can you see the applications now going up more than exponentially? So it is producing more than 65 gigawatts per annum in 2015. Let me expand this bit here, the cost, just to show you. That is another graph to show that from 77, it was about $77 per watt, and it has came down by a factor of 400, and to this level. Today we are 2020. I have expanded that last 4 years. Can you see it is still going down? So the cost of solar has gone down. Now cost of solar is same as power from the national grid. Grid parity has been achieved. What is the current status of PV? I need to spend few words here. Current status is total global PV installed is about 900 gigawatts by end of 2021. Now people are thinking about going into terawatts. Terawatts region. Current rate of installation is 140 gigawatts per annum. This is equivalent to 7,000 panels per hour. Can you see globally, people are installing 7,000 panels per hour. This is going to create a problem because their lifetime is about 25-30 years. So when we install this, we need to think about the future. We are going to have a lot of used solar panels. We need to think about future businesses like recycling of PV waste products. So recycling must be thought about now. We have to establish it so that when the solar panels are coming as a waste, we need to recycle them. Science is very important. We have to I am very pleased to say that the formation of solar full cycle global program by Dr. Priyantha Vijayasuriya and a team including Lalit Gunaratne. I must say a few words about these two people. Lalit Gunaratne I met in 1991 during my higher education link program, and he's one of the pioneering people who had a company, solar energy company. During that time, there were only 2 or 3 companies. So we worked for nearly 3 decades. And Dr. Priyantha Vijayasuriya, I met him in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, in a conference, and then we have been working for about 2 decades. I am glad to see that Sri Lankan people are thinking about future, starting these businesses for recycling, because there will be a lot of solar panels to recycle. So these are 2 pioneering people to promote solar within Sri Lanka. There are other people as well. I am one of the people because of my 45 years research in solar, I started to promote it. That is how I met these people. And these are pioneers. In fact, Dr. Vijayasuriya is the first founding member of Solar Industries Association in Sri Lanka. And just few names. I also want to say that when we started promoting solar in Sri Lanka in early 1990s, there were only 3 or 4 solar companies in the country. But now I hear through SIA, there are 200 solar energy companies registered, but 60 of them are very active. So that is a great achievement because of this promotional work. I must tell you, for many of you are university students, and if you go into research, what you can achieve is tremendous. If you are successful, you can be very rich as well. I'll tell you one other example. This is somebody from Colombo Physics Department. I can't remember the name. I know him very well. He went to do his PhD in United States. He was in a group of 4 or 5 people researching, and they worked on cadmium sulfide and cadmium telluride solar cells. They commercialized it, and it becomes first solar company today. As a member of this team, when they sold the company, he had millions, and he's a millionaire now. He's less than 40 years old. He's fully retired. He doesn't have to work. He has income coming from the company. The First Solar is the #1 thin films solar cell production company today. So that is what happens. You all can do it. This is someone from physics department from Columbia University. And I met him twice in United States, and he's now just doing what he wants as a consultant. And that is the power of research. So you need to think about the future, think about sustainability, do various things. Let me move on to applications of solar power. These applications came up in 1950s and 60s. Very small, it's a solar cells, power in the wristwatch, power in the calculator. It is for convenience, very small amount of energy. And the solar energy came up in remote areas, in satellites. That is how we started. And standalone solar home systems, a 50-watt solar panel can do the job. Solar panels on the roof during the daytime, charging the battery. During the night time, giving out light, several light, power for the radio, power for the television. Now in Sri Lanka, there are some large number of solar panels. This is how a company started. I must mention that people like Lalit Gunaratne, they were starting at late 1980s, starting this research for solar home systems in Sri Lanka, and also solar for water pumping. So that is what we can do for poorest of the poor. I do this to wake up any sleeping audience. This must be the first experience of fire. People are very innovative. Humans are very innovative. They must have used this fire for lighting caves, for cooking food. And then soon they produce the lamp. This must be the first lamp. A rock, a dry wood, and animal fat. The lamp has developed, and then these are the kind of lamps we have seen today. 1/3 of the world population use these lamps with kerosene. Then came the two inventions, the battery and the bulb, and we have been using all sort of bulbs to use electricity, and now coming into LEDs, light emitting diodes. In fact, we had red LEDs for a long time. The blue LEDs were invented only 1992 by Nakamura. So when you have three colors, three main colors, you can produce white color. And in the past, we were going and buying 75 watts or 100 watts tube light. Now you can buy 10 watts tube lights with white LEDs. Can you see the energy efficiency? We can use less power to get the same effect. So this is what happens now. We have solar roofs on houses. When the sun is out, it produces electricity, charge the batteries. In the night, LEDs illuminate our houses. In fact, if you look at the LED and solar, they are very similar. PN junction, but they do opposite things. 100 watts produce power for drip irrigation. Water pumping by solar will revolutionize the world, stop the desertification, and this technology is beautiful to protect our usable lands. Otherwise, the deserts are expanding. What we can do is pump water through drip irrigation, grow more trees, and stop desertification. This is Hunugallava School in Sri Lanka. First solar-powered computers. This school doesn't have electricity from the national grid, but they have 25 computers to run. At the same time, they have built these buildings into the environment. It is natural air conditioning. And in the future, this is electric car. We don't want to burn diesel and petrol. You know that UK government has already established policies not to produce any combustion engine cars after 2030. So almost everything should go into electric vehicles. Every government should bring these policies. Can you see, to produce hot water? These are solar roofs connected to the national grids, and the solar roofs are coming everywhere around the globe. And our future buildings should be like this. All the roofs and the walls covered with solar panels connected to the national grid. And also they are coming into 10 megawatt scale now. In fact, they are going into very large scale. One thing we need to remember, 1 or 2 is okay for training electrical engineers on the ground, but we should not cover fertile land with solar panels. In a country like Sri Lanka, we need to have them on roofs because they are free. If we cover the fertile lands, we cannot produce enough food for future. So people are going into gigawatt level, now 500 gigawatt level. This is energy from desert. In the Gobi Desert, this is happening. And when you cover the desert, you can get enough electricity. At the same time, use some of the electricity at the edge, pump water through drip irrigation, grow more trees, and you can stop desertification. At the same time, wherever you use solar panels, we should not cover fertile lands. And even at the edge of the desert, if you install solar panels, we can, in the shade, we can grow vegetables. So that way we can cultivate unused lands in the future using this technology. And people talk about floating solar farms. They have many advantages. But people talk about having floating solar farms in Sri Lanka. We have to be a little bit careful. Water level must be constant throughout the year and for over 25 years. To my knowledge, most of the reservoirs in Sri Lanka, they dry down during the summer, exposing uneven surface. So that can damage this floating system. So we have to be careful before we install them. Yeah, that is what happens. Many inland lakes, they are not suitable due to drying out during summer, exposing uneven ground surface. Some lagoon areas around the country could be used very successfully. There are many advantages in this case. Let me talk about future energy scenario. Carbon economy, we have established carbon economy. The world is addicted to carbon. We need to now go into carbon neutral economy, reducing pollution. We don't stop there. We need to go into hydrogen economy. So in fact, what we need to do is an energy mix for Sri Lanka. I have we are very fortunate, we have 35% hydro, solar, wind, biomass, biogas, energy from waste, any other renewables will be the mixture right for Sri Lanka. And what is worried here is the intermittent energy production from solar and wind. Now this will be reduced by producing hydrogen. What we need to do, use the freely available solar and freely available wind to break down freely available water molecules so that we can produce hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen goes to the atmosphere and we save hydrogen. We burn it whenever we need. So that is the energy carrier in the field. That is the energy storage. And when you burn hydrogen, you produce water. No carbon at all. We go into hydrogen economy. That is why it is green. Nuclear energy will create only a fearful world. We can discuss during the Q&A if necessary. We should not go for that. Nuclear energy is not an option for Sri Lanka. It is our responsibility to leave a safe and peaceful world for our next generations, not a fearful world. So we can discuss during the discussion. Let me come to my end of the presentation, solar villages. When I came out of British Petroleum Company in 1990, I knew that the solar technology is matured enough. So we need to promote it. So I went to schools in Sheffield, in UK, promoted it, and then established a link, higher education link program supported by the DFID UK and the British Council. I was the initiator and the coordinator. And the British Council really liked it. They supported us for 6 years. We completed 40 senior academics from 5 universities from Sri Lanka. During this time, we established a huge network within the country and also within the region called SAREP, South Asia Renewable Energy Program. Now this has developed Solar Village project and also ongoing Solar Asia Conference series. During these 6 years, we had conferences every year at the very highest level. This is the British Council. This is the Science and Technology Minister from the government. This is the Deputy High Commissioner from UK in Colombo. And at the highest level, we promoted this. As a result, Solar Village came up. So during the concept, I must mention Lalit Gunaratna again. He visited me on a higher education link program. Two of us were brainstorming and writing article how to do this solar village project. So for sustainable development and reduction of poverty of any community, 3 features must be fulfilled. Number 1, empower the community by establishing a wealth creation method. If we don't create wealth, we cannot reduce poverty. Number 2, introduce various development projects while guiding them to manage created wealth with full transparency. You know what's the meaning of full transparency? That is without corruption. Unfortunately, at the moment, Sri Lanka is covered with a cloud of corruption. I think if we want to develop, we have to remove this. Otherwise, it will not happen. But we are trying to introduce that within our solar villages so that people can do things in full transparency. They can develop themselves. How do we do it? We establish a village development committee to manage and organize development projects. They are the people who do it. We simply plant the seed, create the wealth creation. VDC will develop it into a huge solar village. And this is what we were during the design stage. We were thinking about solar home systems, street lighting, solar water pumping, vegetable farming and animal farming, brick making, etc. And this is what we did in 2008. This is the pilot project. What we did was all the infrastructure was there. What we did was we displaced the diesel pump using solar powered pumps. And this is the opening ceremony. About 85 final year students came from Colombo, and we had it in the village temple. And this is what happens in the solar village. As soon as we installed this, we stopped burning diesel. Diesel is very expensive in Sri Lanka. So we reduced carbon dioxide emission, noise and air pollution disappeared, and independence from imported diesel. In fact, all the people were paying their water bills, collected about 250,000 rupees per annum, and all that money went to buy diesel, imported diesel. Now, by installing this, we stopped all that. This wealth was within the village, so that is the wealth creation. So people were managing it, VDC was managing it without corruption, and developed the nursery, developed the village school, developed the library and temple, etc. And also this project gave free water to the temple and the school. 200 families benefit from 3 villages. It's a village cluster. Scholarships were given to some children from APSL. And through Sramadana, people were planting trees. This is to keep the environment well. Organic farming, beekeeping, road repairs, they were working like one community because of the empowerment from this project. And also we introduced, our aim is to introduce things like food packaging so that they get extra income. And also for the pilot project, we worked with the government ministry and distributed 100,000 Tom JC mango plants and 500 beehive boxes to introduce export quality products. And of course, that will bring extra income to people. The whole aim of this project is to empower people to stand on their own feet, to escape from poverty trap. So that is the idea of this project. These are some of the pictures. I will tell you a little bit about this school later. During these 6 years, I was visiting Maldives as well, all 6 years. When I saw this photo, I took a photograph of this, and what it said was, corruption spreads like a virus unless you stop it. I really liked it, and I took a photograph, and it is very important. And this is something we are teaching in the guiding people to do things in a nicest possible way, so that whole community develop. And also we continuously updated political leaders on these projects. That's, if I come to that school, the history of this school is it was built by people in that village. It ran for 50 years without water, without electricity. Teachers don't want to go there, and the student numbers went down to 20. Government decided to close it in 2007. What we did was we started the project centered in this school. Our meetings were held here. We applied this concept, and this is the school today. You can't even recognize it. In fact, there is a building coming up that happened during the first year, mainly built by Samadana. Is a library and a classroom, and the teachers are highly motivated. They have electricity, tap water, and few computers. Now the teachers are there. Now it has become 4th out of 455 primary schools in the region. And they are producing 60% scholarship results from this primary school. Can you see? It was earmarked for closure. You can turn it completely. So we started second solar village in Noche 2017. Installed a 6 kilowatt solar roof connected to the national grid with Net Plus system. That is the income coming to the community. Communication is very important with the community, and also they are very active. This is the best solar village I have seen to date. They also have a water purification system. So they pump water, purify water, and sell that water to 7 surrounding villages to protect them from kidney diseases. And they are also using those funds, the income coming from this, for microcredits. And last time I saw them, talked to them, was about some years ago because of the COVID situation. And they said that they have collected 45 lakhs in their pot. Can you see? It is a very poor village. 45 lakhs now sitting in there, and they are using it to develop the community. And it is growing as well. Can you see? When you empower them, they do it very well. This is our third solar village in Pulmude. Retired gentleman donated 1.5 million rupees, and we installed it in Pulmude. It's same, that is the income generation, and it is, this income is used to develop destroyed infrastructure in the region. We completed 4th solar village in Puthianagar in 2020 with the Foundation of Goodness, working with them. That is the solar roof, 5 kilowatt solar roof, creating income for the community. This is the last one we have created. We have produced, this is in fact 2 months ago, October 2021. It took some time because of the travel problems. Helasarana completed their 25th anniversary, a wonderful service to Sri Lanka. They wanted to do this project to celebrate their 25 years of charity work. And we completed this 5 kilowatt, and it pays the water pumping bill for the school. The rest goes to the community for community development. So I'm coming to my last slide. future outlook and expectations. We hope to gradually replicate. At the moment, we have 5 solar villages completed in Sri Lanka. Please remember, every solar village has about 1,000 people. Just imagine you are encouraging them to grow more trees around. You are improving the environment. They are doing things with full transparency. They develop themselves to escape from poverty traps. The Nochia Solar Village is a wonderful example for rest of the country and also to rest of the developing countries. So what we are doing is, in fact, when I gave the keynote speech on 13th of November for Helasarana AGM, the following day, 2 people came and donated 1 million each. That is, we don't collect funding. The funding will be with the donor. And what we do is we ask people to do things. We set up the whole thing and ask them to pay directly to the subcontractor. A solar energy company in Sri Lanka install it and they pay for it. We don't touch people's funding. What we are doing is, so we are now working on 6th and 7th solar villages. It will take some months to complete them. Now, this project embeds 13 out of 17 UN SDGs. It is not only one. 13 out of 17 SDGs embedded. So it provides solutions to mitigate climate change while developing needy people, reducing poverty. What my thinking is, every university should start a solar village as a social science lab to produce graduates with social responsibilities. Once we have a solar village attached to a university, there are a lot of projects for everybody, science, engineering, social sciences, to develop these people. When university lecturers and students go to a remote village, that itself motivates the whole village. I have seen it. It's beautiful to see that. I was traveling to Maldives Islands during those 6 years to establish solar islands in Maldives. As I said before, there are 1,200 islands there, but only 200 are used by people. They are known as atolls, but they are the people who see these atolls disappearing because of the rise in sea levels. So they are frightened. In fact, they know what to do, and they are the people who are going towards carbon neutral, because all the boats are using petrol and diesel. So we have started to use solar powered boats there, and we discussed this during those 6 years. Also, I had the opportunity to visit Nigeria on a UK-Nigeria delegation. It was a very high profile meeting. I was very impressed by seeing about 45 vice chancellors and pro-vice chancellors in the hall. In my 45 minutes talk, I said, with my solar energy experience, I will train lecturers at PhD level for solar energy. So they are the trainers, future trainers. And also we will introduce solar villages to Nigeria, and also to go with parallel to Solar Asia Conference series, we will start Solar Africa Conference series. They were so thrilled. When I came back, I had 6 Nigerian lecturers came with scholarships, and 5 of them have now completed. They are back in the country. They are eager to start solar villages. They are very knowledgeable about this project. And as I said, most of my 29 PhD students, ex-PhD students, are around the globe. My dream is, if we gradually replicate this within Sri Lanka, we are a unique group to take it out to other developing countries. We can easily take it to Bangladesh, India, Malaysia and Nigeria, because my students are there waiting for it. We have to somehow raise some funds, and my dream is to see this project, solar villages mushrooming around the globe, and our planet becomes one global solar village. I think we have to do this because it is the right technology to develop ourselves, develop poor people, and develop the whole planet. And this is my last slide. My message is, this is our sun. This is our beautiful planet. My message is, harvest the sun to save the planet, help the poor, and secure our future. Every little contribution will make this happen. I haven't mentioned any about my technical work. To date, I have written 4 books, and that is to keep all because we do research to create new knowledge. They are all written there for future generations to use. And I will stop here, and I'm very happy to answer to any questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, sir, for that incredible lecture. And it was very insightful and very informative session. And I hope many of you have questions for our speaker. Audience, the time is yours now. You can unmute yourselves and ask the questions, or if you are reluctant to do so, you can put the questions in the chat box. Sir, until we get questions from the audience, there were some questions which were forwarded to us prior to the event.
Yes.
One such question is, what is the current situation and available solutions for disposal of end-of-cycle solar panels that are containing toxic materials without harming the environment?
Oh, I think perhaps I gave the answer to that question. If you go back to that slide I prepared, in fact, this message came to me only yesterday. I was so thrilled to see that Dr. Vijayasuriya, where is the, yeah, this is the one. That question is it's a very good question, because we have to expect recycling of PV waste products. Can you see, people are installing 70,000 solar panels per hour. So we will have large amount of solar panels in 20-25 years time. So this is where Dr. Vijayasuriya and the team, including Lalit Gunaratne, started Solar Full Cycle global program. He sent me the document yesterday. I saw it. I didn't have time to read it. I will read it very carefully. And in fact, I must tell you, what they are doing is they are thinking ahead. This is coming. How do we do it? How do we develop business? And it is wonderful to see Sri Lankans are thinking that way and developing this kind of recycling programs. I must tell you one other thing. I mentioned my technique is electroplating. This is a beautiful technique for recycling as well. Because when you have solar panels, if you want to take everything, what you normally do is you take the frame out, the other things, you dissolve it. There are a lot of those white lines are silver. And you have various elements in there. You can have cadmium, indium, tin, lead, those different metals. What we can do is we can dissolve it, get the solution by applying different voltages, you can separate different elements. Just imagine, you know, the silver, the amount of silver people use goes into billions. So we can separate those silver for recycling, coming back. Electroplating is a wonderful system. We can use it in developing countries. And I have been working for nearly 35, 40 years with electroplating. We can use that knowledge combined with this program. And that is the answer to that question, because yes, you will have waste, PV waste products. You can recycle them. That recycling produce a lot of jobs, lot of opportunities. I think I provided, this slide provide the answer to that question. I asked, after seeing that document, I prepared this slide yesterday and added this to this lecture. This is wonderful for Sri Lankans. You have a wonderful, we all have a wonderful education system. We need to use our talents. And it's not only that, throughout the world, youngsters have beautiful education. They can do things, think ahead and prepare for it and develop a business. It will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, Kirti, Mr. Kirti, I see you have raised your hand. You can ask your question. Sir, can you unmute yourself, please?
Right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Right. Professor Dharma, it was a very enlightened, encouraging and knowledgeable presentation. I have some comments and I have a question as well.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the idea of solar village is a great idea. I think we should develop it to the full extent. One of the issues is in Sri Lanka, people are very good at coming up with ideas, good ideas. But of course, any idea, to convert it from an idea into some kind of a product and to manufacture it at an acceptable cost, it needs a lot of soft skills. So I think in Sri Lanka, perhaps there is a gap that although there are people are coming with ideas, there is no infrastructure to support them to develop these ideas into a prototype and then take it into a production scale. So that's one question, is how can you make it happen? The second question is, apart from having the solar villages, I'm aware that in the whole of the world, there are lots of many other different applications of solar panels for various applications to help people, help poor countries. So what are the opportunities in Sri Lanka where people can come up with ideas of solar panels to implement them on different applications within Sri Lanka, perhaps develop the products in Sri Lanka itself? So two questions. How can we get the infrastructure to support large-scale production? Second is how to apply the same kind of technology in other areas.
First one, commercialization. Sri Lanka is not alone. People do research in university environment research institutes. To go from there to prototype and then to the final product is a huge step. That needs a lot of support. As I mentioned, in British Petroleum, we had 26 people working for 8 years to do it, to produce the prototype with unlimited funds, because the BP is an oil company. We had no problem with funds, and it happened. And then when it was produced, they went to California and produced the final product. That is the path for commercialization. There is no shortcut, but for a country like Sri Lanka, it is a bit tough. I'm not saying that in the future we can select these electroplating like things and we can produce other ways. We should do research, and then that commercialization part should be supported. In many countries, it is very good in countries like China, United States, Germany, but even in UK was very good in producing ideas, but it was not very good in converting those ideas into products. So now it is happening. So Sri Lanka has the same problem. So we have to, the government or companies with deep pockets should come into that. Otherwise, researchers can't do it. That is the answer to the first question. But we shouldn't give up. There should be ways of doing it. The researchers should see the way and work through it. The second question is solar villages. I mean, this is a different kind of, because I had to get everything together. I had promotional programs, different lectures showing all applications. Solar village is one of them. I was mainly thinking about our remote, because 70% of the people are in villages in Sri Lanka. So I was thinking about that. That is why I went into solar villages. It is not only solar villages. When it comes to solar panels, if you produce solar panels, it can produce electricity. Think about electricity. Wherever you want it, solar panels will produce that electricity. You can use it in any application. In Sri Lanka, outside, anywhere. I think it is happening now. The production of solar panels, we need to be very careful. If we don't have resources, it will be difficult, but somehow we need to go in that direction. Since there are no shortcuts. I don't know whether I gave the right answer, Dr. Devendra, for the second one.
Right, can I come in again?
Yes, please do.
Now, fairly recently, there was an example from South India in Tamil Nadu. A young girl, a 12-year-old girl, came up with an idea to develop an ironing card, because in India, there are street vendors using charcoal to iron clothing. So this girl at the age of 14 came up with an idea to develop a solar panel ironing card, which is a great innovation. So I guess in Sri Lanka, there must be opportunities like that, not exactly the same, but similar.
Yeah, I mean, you can always, just think about any application. If it needs electricity, solar will produce electricity and you can do it. For young people, it is wonderful to see different techniques, different applications, and use solar energy to do anything you want. In fact, the applications are tremendous. No limitation for applications. Are there any questions? There is a question in chat. Dilip Madhumage, I will read that first. Generally, Schottky barrier is created between P-cat-tail layer and back contact. Then making an ohmic contact is a challenge. This is a technical question. Please remember, this was a problem in cadmium sulfide, cadmium telluride solar cells. Cadmium sulfide is always N-type. Cadmium telluride, you can produce very easily P-type and N-type. If you have a P-type cadmium telluride, it is a PN junction. You need ohmic contact. If it is N-type, you have a cadmium sulfide N-type and N-type junction, weak junction. At the back, you can have a very large Schottky barrier, and then it is a tandem solar cell. It is a Schottky barrier plus NN junction together. And we have shown that experimentally, if you use N-type cadmium telluride, you can produce better devices. And also now people are going into that. Don't just think about a PN junction only. Don't stick to a PN junction. Because when the cadmium telluride is N-type, it produces better devices. And in that case, it is a N junction and a Schottky barrier at the back. So NREL has produced a paper very recently. Please look for it. And what they are saying is cadmium-rich cadmium telluride, which is N-type, produce better devices. That is the answer to that. If we use p-cadmium telluride, it is ohmic contact. If you use N-cadmium telluride, it's a large Schottky barrier at the back. That is the answer to that question.
Thank you, sir. Audience, do you have any more questions?
Until perhaps you think about a question, let me tell you one thing, because I made a comment. We need, for each country, we need a mixture of technologies. I mentioned only 4 for Sri Lanka: hydro, solar, wind, biomass. We should not even think about nuclear energy. I will just expand that a little bit, because a lot of nuclear scientists come and say that nuclear energy is clean energy. I say, no, it is not clean energy. When it is producing energy, yes, it doesn't produce carbon dioxide. I fully agree with that. But what about the production of nuclear energy? You need to do uranium mining and purification. During that time, there is carbon dioxide emission. And what about 10 years of construction of the power station? Huge amount of concrete, metals. During that 10 years, there is carbon dioxide emission. And after, say, people say that the lifetime of a nuclear plant is about 30 years. After 30 years, you have to decommission it. I was listening to a lecture from Sellafield. They are now ready for decommissioning. They say that it takes 50 years to decommission. What about the cost of that? During that, everything is radioactive. So we should not talk about only during the power production, there is no carbon dioxide emission. Decommissioning is going to be about 5 times expensive than commissioning. So all these should be taken into account. And then we need to think about dangers. You know that in Chernobyl in 1986, that accident happened due to human error. Human errors can happen. And of course, when accidents can happen with tsunami, earthquakes, tornadoes, or terrorist attacks, we have no control. For a country like Sri Lanka, we don't have enough security. The best security is in Japan, but the tsunami hit. You can't stop that, it damaged. So these are the damaging situations. We do not need that. The other thing is, what about the waste? People have been working on nuclear waste that is not completely solved. Just imagine in Sri Lanka, we have the household waste problem in the country. How can we manage nuclear waste? So we need to think about this. And also one of my PhD students in a debate said, nuclear energy is a very selfish way of using energy, because we use nuclear energy for our comfort and we leave the problems, nuclear waste, for our children and grandchildren to sort out. So he said straight away, he said, I agree with him. He said, it is a selfish way of using energy. Thank you. It is just to expand that about nuclear energy. That is why we should not think about nuclear energy in Sri Lanka. We are blessed with a lot of natural energy so that we can use. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think Dr. Kirti has another question. So you
Another
can...
question.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not a question. I fully agree with Professor Dharmadasa on his comments about nuclear power. So But I do have something to add. Now, another way of producing electricity is burning waste. Now, it is a very good technique. However, when you burn waste, it can emit sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, as well as mercury into the air, and also particles. So unless you have all the precautions to remove the sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide and mercury and other things from burning waste is a very risky energy production method for Sri Lanka. So that's what I wanted to add. Would you agree with that?
I fully agree with that, Kirti. That in that video we saw that what is that country, Switzerland or somewhere? They have a power plant
in Denmark.
Yeah, they use waste, they burn it, but they don't allow any of these gas to escape within the system. They absorb them, they remove them. Only the only thing goes up to the air is water vapor. So unless we have that kind of, in fact, they have made it like a hill and there is a slope for skiing. Yeah. Otherwise, a lot of these toxic gases can go into the, so biomass, energy from waste, we have to be very careful. The power plants needs to consider all these issues. I fully agree.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Kirti, for those valuable comments. And any more questions from the audience?
Sir, we have a forwarded question. This was forwarded by Tharosa Rajaratna. Conventional or commercial solar cells show very low surface albedo due to its color, which increases ground level temperature around solar farms. In a larger scale, this has the potential of changing the local weather by altering local air density. What can be done to mitigate this effect?
I didn't really get the question. Could you kindly repeat it again, please?
Sure, sir. Conventional solar cells show very low surface albedo due to its color, which increases ground level temperature around solar farms. In a larger scale, this has the potential of changing the local weather by altering local air density. What can be done to mitigate this effect?
This albedo effect is due to reflection from the surroundings and reflections from water, that kind of things. I don't know whether I fully understood the question, but people are trying to use various things. That's standard solar cells, but now people are going into both surfaces. In a traditional solar cell, light comes from only one side. Now people are going towards bifacial solar cells. That means those electrical contacts from both sides are transparent. Light can come from both sides. So if you keep it somewhere, say on water surface, the direct sunlight comes from the top and the reflected light from water surface comes from the bottom. So that way you can increase the efficiency of the solar cell. So people are working on this. It is called the albedo effect. It is the reflection coming from the surroundings. People are working on double surface, bifacial solar cells, still in research stage. Kirti, would you like to comment on that, please?
Yes, I was listening to that very carefully, and obviously there is a small effect because of the reflection and low reflection, the temperature varies. However, to make it a significant effect for any particular area, it has to be a huge area of solar cell panels. So it is very unlikely that it is going to be a problem in Sri Lanka, because as a percentage of the area covered by solar cells, I don't think it even covers for 1%. So in that situation, the environment and the environmental effects are influenced by the 99% of the area, surrounding areas. So I believe, yes, it is something to be considered, but I don't think it will be a problem in the shorter or the longer term in Sri Lanka. It may be for some countries where they have hundreds of acres of solar panels. So that's my comment. I don't know if you agree.
I was reading a paper on albedo effect. People have tried it. People have tried both sides. The maximum they could get, it is from both sides. Light come from both sides, and maximum they got was about 6%. I mean, it is not a huge effect. That reflection came from water from the bottom side. So albedo effect, people are using it, trying it. They are only in research stage yet. I don't think it will create huge contribution.
I think we have covered all of the questions from the audience, sir. Thank you, audience, for your questions, and thank you, sir, for those elaborated answers. And also, thank you, Dr. Kirti, for your valuable comments. Since we have reached the end of today's session, I would like to invite the project organizer, Ms. Viraji Aryatilaka, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the G17 University Ambassadors Consortium and my co-organizer, Ms. Navoda Jayasinghe, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who helped me to make this event a success. Thus, I would like to thank the Honorable Speaker of today's event, Professor I.M. Dharmadasa, for accepting our invitation amidst your busy schedule to educate us on solar villages. I'm certain that your expertise, knowledge, and insights have helped the audience to think beyond the box and enable them to integrate science and society and convert policy and their innovative ideas to action. And sir, I wish you best of luck and strength for future projects and wish that you may be able to make your dream of a global solar village a reality. I would like to extend my heartiest gratitude to the head of the Department of Environmental and Industrial Sciences, Senior Lecturer in Physics, Dr. Buddhika Dasanayake, for introducing the guest lecturer, Professor Dharmadasa, for providing the Zoom platform and continuing to support me throughout this webinar in every way. The Department of Environmental and Industrial Sciences and all its staff deserves a special mention for partnering up with us to make this event a success. Next, I would like to thank the moderator of today's event, Ms. Kavini Sabaratna, for gracefully hosting the webinar. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Ashan Pereira, the founder of the Road to Rise Association, for initiating G17 University Ambassadors Consortium, which is a timely needed program for university undergraduates to become the next generation of future potential young professionals. I would also like to thank the Leadership Council of the Road to Rise, executive members of the G17 University Ambassadors Consortium, and my university coordinator, Hashanti Lakaranna, and the University of Kelaniya G17 coordinator, Hasini Gayara, and my fellow ambassadors. Your help was the key behind the success of this event. Next, I would like to express my appreciation to the organizing committee of the Way Forward. Without your support, this event would not have been successful. And I should definitely mention the support of my family and all my friends. I'm most grateful for you. Last but not least, I would like to thank the audience for being supportive throughout the event. And we strongly believe that you will give your continuous support in achieving sustainable development goals. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Viraji. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
ඒ දෙකම සිදු වෙලා නැහැ. එන හැම ආරංචියක් අනුවම සිංහල අවුරුදු කාලේ වෙන විට රටේ ආහාර නිදියක් ඇති වෙනවා. මේම තත්ත්වයක් ඇති වුණොත් අපිට මෝඩයන්ට තියෙන දේශපාලන පසුබිම ගැන හිතා කොහොමද ජනතාව අතර සිදුවෙන පිටිවීමක් ඇති වෙනවා. ඒ පිටිවීම ආණ්ඩුවට අපේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට දෙකටම බලපාන. දැනට ආණ්ඩුව ඉන්දියාව එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කරනවා ණයට පෙර ගන්න, ණයට ආහාර ගන්න. මේ සාකච්ඡා